Right, guys, welcome back. This is the Above Average FPL podcast. My name is Adam, and as always, joined by Baker. How are you doing, mate?
Good, mate. Early doors.
I had to rewind back from evening to say afternoon or something like that.
Yeah. Feels it.
We're accommodating this afternoon. So we've got an Shooting the Breeze type podcast today, and we're very happy to welcome Pranil, late riser. How you doing, mate?
Doing good. Very, very happy to be on this podcast. I think it's the first time that just three of us are chatting. I've been on here a couple of times with the whole gang, but happy to get into the thick of things. I mean, I was just talking to both of you boys, and we're not really stuck into this season quite just yet, hoping this pod sort of accelerates the process.
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll do our best to do that. And we are streaming live. So good afternoon to everyone in the chat, wherever you are. We've got 35 of you, something like that. So thank you for joining us. And if you want to ask any questions, go ahead and do so. Quick admin. So remember to follow us all on Twitter at Above Average FPL, at Baker FPL 343, and at Late Riser 12. For Pranil, the podcast is supported the podcast is supported by Crypto Block Dan on Twitter. Go check him out. He is in the play to earn crypto space. Fantastic guy, and is actually getting involved in FPL properly this year as well. So, look for him in our league. And that reminds me, I can't remember what our league code is, but there we go. Also, we're supporting FPLtips.com. FPLtips.com. It's a weekly newsletter that comes to you by email. The link will be in the description below. If it's not there now, it will be there later. Go check them out on Twitter as well. You get a weekly newsletter from them by email, just a 5-minute email, giving you the lowdown on some of the useful stats and information that's going on throughout that week. I think that's basically all we need to say for now.
I've got the league code UAT148. UAT148.
UAT148. Good work, mate. Good work.
I mean, considering the guy that won FPL joined your league last year, it might be a good omen to join their league this season.
It might be. I might have made a point of that on Twitter. He might have only been in a couple of content creators mini leagues, and ours and Andy over at Let's Talk. So yeah, Jamie did amazing last year. So yeah, get involved, and let's see how you do this season. So where are we starting, boys? How are we feeling about? I mean, we spoke about it last week, but how are we feeling now? Another week's in the bank, with all the information that we have.
I think fun starts now, doesn't it? Like, just training starts now, doesn't it? So that's then the next piece for me, is starting to get some visions of it. We talked before a bit early on in the season. You're a bit more tribal about your own team. You're always going to be bullish about your own team at this time of year. You want it to do well. So like me today, seeing Conte making Kane throw up, I'm like, yes, that's a sign. Get the predictions up immediately, straight in. Pranil, how did you feel seeing Marcus score a goal today?
Feels good. Very, very optimistic about Ten Hag as a manager, in fact, and the negative perception that United have, sort of as a bottler club, etc. as well, in terms of things going extremely downhill last season. I think it's probably the worst we could have done, and I believe that we haven't had the coach of his caliber in the last 7 or 8 years. In my opinion, it's one of the most forward-thinking appointments we've made so far. I mean, when you're talking about Mourinho, sort of on a downward trajectory. Ole, as much as I wanted him to work out, doesn't really have the credentials. So I'm feeling optimistic about this. And, not too bogged about the transfer market, etc. as well. I mean, yeah, obviously I want all the guys that Eric wants to come in. But, these guys, actually, if you really think about it, except for the year that Ronaldo played with last season, Rashford, Martial, and Bruno have played a fair bit of football together. They've got a little bit of understanding and team chemistry going on between them. The year before last season, actually, United were the second highest goal scorers in the league. And it was primarily down to these three and Greenwood, pushing in the goal. So I think people might be a little slow to react on United, especially if we have a slowish preseason. But I think they're priced really, really well and will be an important factor in FPL this season.
You think they've got kind of like Tottenham Pochettino vibes about it, in that you can see that there's going to be developing a process deep within the club, and it may take 6 months, 9 months, a year to really embed in, and it will be a process. And I think United over the last 4 or 5 years have obviously been on this. I mean, yeah, they finished third a couple of years ago, but generally not where they want to be, right? So they've been on this kind of downward. Is it as bad as a spiral? Maybe, but I think so. United fans probably have the patience to wait another 6 to 9 months to allow Ten Hag to get these philosophies into the squad. And as you say, I mean, it's not like the players haven't played with each other, and like quite a lot of Pochettino's Tottenham, they played with each other already, and it was just about raising the overall level of the squad to get it in line with what the club needs to do.
Yeah, and I mean, if I had to guess, I think defensively, given the fact that Ten Hag wants to play out from the back and be a possession dominating team, I expect a few mistakes at the back and conceding some silly goals early season. So I do reckon that the defense is a place we don't touch until we see this team settled, but wouldn't mind punting in early on a United attacker if they look like their first choice, because if any of these players are playing up to their potential, all of them are underpriced, including Bruno Fernandes.
Oh, absolutely.
I think the Ten Hag thing, Pochettino is an easy comparison, but when you think about how quickly an impact can happen, I always think about Pochettino's first game for Southampton, and Nigel Adkins was firmly in. People liked him. It was a surprise that he lost his job, and Pochettino came in, and I remember it was a Monday night game. Everton were a better team, in those days, and it was a 0-0. But I genuinely have never seen a team completely transform in 5 days. And this was a guy that was doing his interviews not in English, and how he spoke, and genuinely was such a different performance. The pressing, the way they moved, it was like, this is coaching. This isn't just running around. This is drilled. And then with the Ten Hag stuff, so when we last summer, when we were looking for a manager, he was spoken to by Daniel Levy, and the rumours are that charisma was the thing that they felt they didn't have enough of. So we got Nuno in, who punched the air and said he's going to make you proud, and was appalling. But I was expecting to see from Ten Hag that he was a bit wooden in how he is, and that's not what I've seen so far. Yeah, and there are a lot of talk that he spent the last year really working on not just the normal English, but more of that slang English to get himself in a position where he comes across in a much more confident, charismatic way. And I feel like they've seen that. I think I saw you tweet earlier about him just being loud out on the training field. And they're the good signs. They're the things that I think is the key things that I look for in pre-season when I'm looking at players, looking at things, is how are they handling themselves?
And a couple of hours before that, I saw the press conference as well. And how you see Ten Hag when he's handling the press, and how you see him in terms of body language, attitude, etc. as well, day and night. He's not a guy out there who's going to be friends with the Jonos out there, etc. as well. Like you mentioned, wooden, right? He was blunt, wooden, a man of few words in the press conferences, not really giving anything to the journals, being kind to everybody, but just being blunt and cold. Like, he'll answer in 3 words if he can. And then you see him on the training pitch, and his eyes are bigger, his eyes light up, the way he's interacting, pushing the players. It's night and day what you see, and I'm just feeling optimistic. That's all.
So we're looking potentially underpriced United assets for sure this season, potentially.
I think we need some bargains. I think we need to find some. So let's talk approach. Let's ask Pratt, because mate, you're the legendary manager. We are not so much. We're the ones work in progress. That was fun. Name is late riser, not latter riser. I actually was one of those that thought it was that for a little while.
Me too.
And where did it come from? For anyone that doesn't know.
So basically, I tend to suck in the when I jumped onto the FFS forums, and what happened during that season was that I had a terrible first half of the season, and had obviously bragging rights were on the line with my best mate, and that's how everybody's gotten into this game. And discovering FFS and discovering the nuances of playing FPL, I had a stormer of a second half of the season. And that's where the name Late Riser has come on. And this sort of thing has stuck. I generally don't really tend to do that well, or I do all right in the first half of the season and tend to accelerate towards the end. Generally what happens when I'm having my good seasons.
So what does that mean for this season then? So, with this season, we've had last few seasons have been interesting, to say the least. Last season, obviously, we had blanks and doubles like for about 20 game weeks in a row. It felt like it was blanks and doubles. Season before, obviously, we had a big block of no football, and we've had chips added in, or we've had like an extra free hit. We've had this, that, and the other. This season, again, is not going to be what we would consider, I guess, a normal season. Again, because we've got the World Cup and we've got this extra set of unlimited transfers coming in the middle. So I think what we're looking to see is, can we be more aggressive from day dot this season? And is that on your mind for how you might want to approach it this year?
Yes, because what happened was 2 years ago, I finished 650K. And when you're having a season like that, you're going to go look back and wonder what the hell went wrong. And you can't just put it down to luck, because there's definitely something that you did wrong. I think if you're finishing 50K, 100K, you can maybe put that down to luck. But if it's 650K, you need to wonder what happened. And I look back and I noticed that the trends in most of the seasons that I had. And I noticed that all the time, what exactly happened is I used to have a bunch. So for those that don't know, I like to bet against the crowd in an opportunistic way whenever I can. And it isn't done on just a whim. There is a lot of research that goes into clicking that button, betting against the crowd when I do it. But all these bets that came through primarily came through in the second half of the season, not in the first half of the season. And then I came across FPL Salah's Abdul. He's a legend in his own right, absolute monster of the game. And he spoke about a post from FISO where he said that you generally need to stick with the crowd and do what they're doing, etc. as well, because the opportunities will come later. And I sort of tempered my style of playing last season, where I went fairly template, more considered in my approach, etc. Stuck with the crowd early season, and then once 10, 12. So we're a hybrid breed of managers, right? All of us sitting here, we aren't just eye test, or we aren't just analytics, as they say. But what happens is, if you're taking risky moves or gambles, it's not something that data is going to tell you. It's something that 10, 12 weeks of watching the games, watching the highlights, and you see a slight shift, whether it's in team formation or role change, etc. that's happening. And you're going to want to take 6 or 7 bets against the crowd over the course of the season. And I just realized that I'm going to control myself, hone that instinct until maybe game week 10, 12 as much as I can, and really have an extra level of filter when I'm betting against the crowd. And that's what happened last season. And it worked out fairly well. My co-host Zoff, who's in the chat, he calls me a template riser now because of how considered I was last season. But I think there's no harm in improving as a manager. And what I'm doing is I'm maybe keeping the ceiling as an FPL manager in terms of the ranks that I want to get to, but I think my floor is getting higher the more considered I get, and not so much of a risk taker. But then, we had that little rule change this season where we're essentially not having to care beyond game week 16 this season. And that in my head is a big macro factor, wherein you can afford to look at the fixtures for 5, 6, 7 weeks if you want to. I reckon at the start of the season, looking at it just for 5 or 6 weeks might be a good idea, because there's a lot of information to assimilate, especially this season, given there's a change of style in play in all the top 6 teams except Arsenal, I reckon, and maybe Spurs. I think Chelsea are going to have a change of style. United have a new manager. Liverpool have a traditional number 9 now. They're replacing Mane, and that's a big deal. And so are Manchester City. So, there might be trends that might be there in terms of jumping onto, and you can take advantage of that early on. So keeping that in mind, I want to actually look at just a block of 5 fixtures and target that, like trying to find as many opportunities as possible. I call it hall chasing. So I want to do that early doors. And it might not be as difficult as it sounds, because what's clear is the good teams are good and the good teams have good fixtures. And what everybody is doing, I'm going on a little bit of a rant here, but what everybody is doing is jumping on Manchester City and Liverpool. All for it. But why I'm on this spot is because I have a few selfish reasons, and I want to ask you boys, I mean, why aren't more people looking at Spurs?
I like you,
Because
I'll just start with that.
Adam, what's your reason why people aren't looking at Spurs?
I just think everyone hates Spurs. That's why. Honestly, I think there's a cognitive historical bias that people just don't like Tottenham, and that's fine. I don't mind that. Yeah, we saw it 2 years ago when Kane and Son smashed everything to pieces, and even last year people were reluctant up until Son started just battering the door down to really jump on, and those that did get on paid. It paid. Everyone was just refusing to come off Salah to get there, and it paid last year for those that did. Just ask Jamie, man. Right? So there is I could rant at this point.
Yeah,
to be honest.
I think there is elements of it. You have to remember that Chelsea fans are not going to like Tottenham. Just like watch it. Anyone who watches us as a Tottenham part will be like, oh, we can revel in the fact of there's going to be an element of bias in how we talk about Chelsea. We're going to be happy if they're in a state of flux. There's going to be a bit where Arsenal make good transfers and we're going to look at that and go, will it work? Will it fly straight out of the blocks? And those type of things. So there is those. West Ham.
I don't buy that. I think
so there are pieces of it though, but you then add some other layers. They are expensive this season, but they're not cheap. And even in trying to make sort of like freemium drafts and the like, you're like, oh, I can do it if I do Kane a lot easier than I can do it if I do Son. That extra $500,000 actually is quite a big consequence on the ones under it when I've tried to look at how do I get Kane in my team. Then is Kulusevski, can he cover? Can he do that? Is that my way in? And you're like, maybe, but it's not Son or Kane, in that sense. I do think people potentially will now overlook Kulusevski in that 8 million spot. I think in the first 3, he will match the City mids. I think he can match Diaz. I think he can match Saka. His Southampton and Wolves are prime games. And we don't know on Chelsea. That's the big thing. We'll talk about Chelsea a bit, but we don't know if we've got to change the system. We're not there in the information sense of what it's going to be, but it doesn't look like it's going to be the same as what we've seen before. And just the personnel's changed. So that's not normally, if we're playing Chelsea, I'm just like, well, that's a 2-1 loss in the bag. Just write it off, done. This is probably the first time I go into a season not feeling that way. There's no better time for us to play them. I know the old cliches and all that stuff, but there genuinely isn't a better time for us to play them. Just like we played City early on, that was a fantastic opportunity, really, in a way, before that beast got motoring. I know we beat them again, but that was a mad game, But Conte, when he's got time, Zoff will tell you all the time, as the problem, mate, is that if he gets 7 days for games, he's an unbelievable manager. Well, he's got a month of training. Like, they've never faced what they faced into today. Now, partly that's the Korean conditions they're in at the moment in the heat, and it's the straight up. But yeah, it's hard not to be bullish. For me, Kane is the massive one that is hard not to be bullish on, because he's a training monster. He's a mentality monster. He is a very simple man. You say to Kane, you do this, I'll make you a star. Look, you've seen that with Mourinho, didn't you? That even in the
old Amazon documentary.
Yeah, is he literally, that's the way you coach Kane. Can you stay with me? I'll make you amazing. Thanks very much, England captain, about to be top scorer for his country. This season, there's a really easy carrot. You have a good season, Harry. You will go down in history as the best player that Tottenham have ever had. You will get Jimmy Greaves' record. It's a really easy carrot. You know,
How many goals does he need for that one?
I've got a feeling off the top of my head it's 23, but I will get you that answer during this pod. But I've got a feeling that's what he needs. He will get it. He'll get it this season. 24. Wow. 24.
Nice. Yeah, he should get it.
He should get
Absolutely
it.
Should.
Absolutely
should get it.
That's all competition. So he'll get that. Yeah, it's look.
It's interesting.
This is information.
It's interesting
time, isn't it?
that you're at the other end of the conversation because you like playing the numbers as it stands, right? Especially at the start of the season, you aren't an extremely risk-averse manager at the start of the season, and you tend to do well at the start of the season. I've noticed the trends, and you tend to have really strong starts to the season. And any serious manager is going to think 10 times, unless you're Andy Martin, betting against Salah and betting against Haaland, given the fixtures that they have at the start of the season. And I'm of the same opinion. I think it's way too risky, given the fixtures that City and Liverpool have, to bet against Haaland and Salah early doors. So the only way to get a Kane or a Son in on the 11th of July, as things stand, is to probably approach for a 3 premium draft. And why that doesn't appeal to everybody is because of the sheer value that your 6 million plus defenders are offering. And everybody that's into analytics and understands the sheer value that these guys are offering understands that there's nothing wrong with going for these big defenders. And I would have probably done that if it wasn't for the fact that I'm probably going to look wildcard around game week 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And that's the prime factor. And knowing the way you play the game, if you had to guess right now, where do you end up game week 1? 3 premium or 2 balanced and big at the back without Kane or Son?
I don't see a way that I go into game week 1 without Kane or Son. I'm actually there's a wild part of my brain that likes both for game week 1, and I'll explain why. And it's that I think potentially, so the best differential captain of last season was KDB. Andy Martin will tell you that. We might have seen his picture occasionally in those ones, but there's a lot of people prepping that they could potentially go Kane to Haaland in game week 1 to game week 2. We've seen before with Kane and Son that there tends to be one that stands out more than the others. You know, you think this is Kane season, this is Son season. Those things happen. Sometimes there's both season. So the start of 2021, there was both season. I'm not fully against the fact that you go both and then you work out, is it KDB or is it Haaland for game week 2?
Go both with Salah.
Go both with Salah in a freemium and then work through and go, actually, what I've got the pivot to KDB that nobody's got. If something says to you that Haaland, as we should call him, Haaland isn't the prime option for game week 2. Now, we've got 4 weeks and we've got that Community Shield. And Haaland, if he just even looks like the monster we all know he is, then this conversation is just off the table. But I want to try to keep it in my brain of keep looking out for it. You know, if we spoke just before the start of the pod and I said it's those midfield options are going to come out of the woodwork because they always do over that first 5 weeks. You know, if you look at the first 6 weeks of last season, these are the top midfielders. Salah, obvious. Past that, Benrahma, Sarr, Decore, Pogba, St. Maximum, Greenwood. Then it was Mane. Then it was Damari Gray. Then it was Bruno. Then it was Townsend, Gallagher.
Townsend.
Like, there are some options that can get you that budget ones. And there were signs. There were signs that Everton midfield was going to be a good option in round, because we knew Richarlison had that time off because of the fact of he'd literally been running to the ground all summer. So those three behind Calvert-Lewin were suddenly a good option. We knew Ben Rama. We knew Sard finished the previous season with those goals against Liverpool. Like, that's the bit I'm looking out for at the moment. Is there things that say we can do it? But they're not there yet. We just have to try and see if we can get those signs in place with it. But if I could, I would.
And they'll definitely come. Absolutely, you will know before game week 1, there will be 4 or 5 enablers, so to say, in the FPL ecosystem, which will enable the 3-member. I have no doubt about that in my head. I mean, you already have a 4.0 million defender who looks like he's going to be nailed in a wing-back position, who scored 2 goals and 2 assists in 14 games. He's incredibly attacking. That's Neco Williams I'm talking about. You already have you have 2 4.5 million defender midfielders who might be playing in the front 3/4 for good teams. I mean, we have Pereira, who looks like he's going to be replacing Carvalho at Fulham, and Marcos Silva likes to play rock and roll football. So you already have that. And then when it comes to people like Rashford, Sancho, I think come game week 1, you'll know whether they're starting or not. Yeah. And similarly, with such enablers in the market, we'll know, we'll find out. And then it needs a few strong enablers to come to us for us to go that way. That's where I am. And it's just not shooting in the dark when it comes to, like Harry Kane and Heung-min Son. I mean, I was reading Jamie's tweet and it really caught my attention because it was the same day I was looking at Kane's number, XG for Kane, and I just want to cite the numbers. So these are his numbers when it comes to XG per 90 in the last 5 seasons: 0.75 per 90, 0.52 per 90, 0.37 per 90, 0.60 per 90, and then 0.56 per 90. Now, the season he scored 29 goals, his XG was 0.75 per 90. And then what Jamie did was he broke down Kane's XG per 90 into the Nuno era and the Conte era. And under Nuno, it was 0.32 per 90. And under Conte, it was 0.68 per 90. Now, if you're looking at Kane's previous 5 seasons, the only season he beats 0.68 per 90 is the 29 goal season. And that's where he averaged 0.75 XG per 90. Now, last year, on paper, was an anomaly year for Kane in terms of, he had a down year in terms of XG. I asked you before we got on, do you think this is going to persist with Kane? But if he maintains his usual standards of finishing, we're looking at a 25 goal season, provided he stays fit. And, when he was having those 29 goal seasons, he was priced at 12.5 million in FPL. And this is not taking into the factor that this is probably the strongest Spurs have been in a while. And he's become a little bit of an assist monster as well. So, will I be surprised to see Kane cross 30 returns in the season? Not at all. And is he value? Is he value at 11.5 when you're expecting him to hit 30 returns for the season? Absolutely. So, yeah, that's where I am.
I think the thing that was noticeable, Kane, was that he missed a lot of chances last season. So let's tackle it 2 ways. One is the start and how long it took. So second goal was game week 18. So he was behind, but he didn't have hardly any XG at that point. So he had 5 XG in the first 18 games, got 2 goals. Had 5 goals in the first 25 games and got, 5 goals out of 10 XG. So he's like 0.5 XG to get a return. From then on, he was a goal per XG, right on it. But I wondered if maybe the quality of finishing went down. But the one thing is probably I noticed, and a lot of people said, oh, is it because he's more creative? Like, people just now recognize it. Like, he's been the best passer in, we'll say, in the league. I'm sure KDB people will say otherwise, but he does things on a football, the way he hits a ball, that we don't see anybody else in our team ever hit. He finished last season with 21 XG for the season. Now, if I take you back, 2021, he had 19 XG for the season. I'll take you back to 1920, he had 13 XG for the season. Yeah, I take you back 18, 19, 16 XG for the season. He's never had as much XG in a season as he had last season. And he was going at a goal per XG. Oh, Adam's daughter's here. Hey, this is the danger of us going early. So he's never had this amount of service ever in his entire Spurs career. If he carries on with that, he'll surpass any record he's ever achieved in a point season for FPL. He'll achieve more than he's ever done in terms of records. This is the most. So although he was the most behind his XG, you might say anomaly season, some might also say the anomaly is that he had so much XG, and you're like, keep giving. And he now has competition. Like, I went to say it there, the best number 9 in the league, and I paused. Imagine how he feels when people pause that he's not the best number 9 in the league. Like, if you need more motivation, that man's throwing up next to the side of the goals this morning. Yeah. Like, full propaganda, mate.
And he's got fullback second cross now.
He has. One interesting one was Perisic today. So, God, this has become a full bias pod. But Perisic, they did the sort of bleep test, but it's 42 laps of the pitch. And Perisic didn't do it. And I didn't realise that he got a calf injury in his last game for Inter. That they're just managing. That is something everyone needs to watch. Damn it, I've done so many tweets about Perisic propaganda. Then I saw that and I was like, ooh, that is interesting. Kulusevski as well didn't do that as well. Also got a calf knock. So those are ones to watch. Richarlison is suspended game at 1. So Son and
we still have 3.5 weeks to figure that out.
Yeah.
Hopefully Perisic isn't there because I'm not worried about the other side as well. I mean, Spence is highly rated, and when Doherty did play for those few games, him and Kane had a real understanding. You mentioned it to us so many times in the chat where these two guys get each other, they know each other, looking for each other all the time. So I'm not worried about that side once Doherty is fit. So it's just about the other side, and if Perisic is in there, yeah.
I think something on Sessegnon though. I mean, in terms of what he's been doing for his fitness, there's been a lot of focus on showing, some of the strength training that he's been doing and some of the explosive training that he's been doing as well. So, Conte is prepping them. I mean, he's prepping them to say, one day it's going to be one guy, another day it's going to be another guy. So these guys have to be ready to start and they have to be ready to perform. I mean, it's going to be absolutely no question.
Can we talk about Chelsea?
Yeah, we can.
Because I think Chelsea is the key. Because I think they're either fantastic value assets, or I think they're the opportunity to jump away from them, and then you open up the door to a freemium. If you're not, you're either looking at and going, these are the best 6 million value players in the game, or you're like, well, actually, if I don't go them, I've got money. So we did. Have we got, Adam, that thing that we were looking at?
I've got it, mate. Yeah, so you want Chelsea first, yeah?
Yeah, let's look at Chelsea because I think these are interesting. So this is Chelsea. This is Chelsea's pass map last season. Their control of the game. So what you're looking at, if you're watching on the YouTube, is on the left hand side is basically anywhere that's blue is where they control possession over their opposition last season. They strangled games. The only place they don't is in the left in their own half. And why do Chelsea not do it in their own half? Because Pranil will tell you.
Alonso
and Chilwell are number 9s.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's fun. And then the places where they don't dominate or neutral is in that number 10 area. And the penalty box. Hey, hardly anybody dominates in that penalty box. So don't take that as a negative because goal kicks. Yeah. And even in your own, corners, it's because of corner kicks. Like those are the reasons why you don't do it. But as a pass map, that's a really well drilled team. The forward don't pass. that's what you see in those ones. Is so what you're looking at on the pass maps is it will show you the kind of more blue the color is, the more value their pass is, the more involved they are. The position they're at is where they're most doing those passes, and the bigger the circle, the more possession they have. So Chelsea are a big possession-based team that strangle teams. It's so well drilled. You can see some others. We can show you Man United's if you want, mate. It's not so fun.
Nope.
But it's a really well drilled team of how they work through. And you can see that it's a 3-4-2-1. I don't think many people will almost call it a 3-4-2-1, but that is it, with those two wide people occupying that position in between the defenders, and then the wing backs are in a really prime position. Like, if they go to 4 at back, everything changes. But why would you, when this is so well drilled? Look how good it is.
We haven't seen anything from them from a centre back point of view in the transfer market yet, or anything at all. I mean, who they've got in there? They've got Silva, who's like 80 years old, and they've got Chalobah.
They've got Chalobah still. They've got Malang Sarr left side. You've got Aspi.
And they've got Ampadu as well. Come back. Is he around?
I think he's around.
He's played some Champions League football. They might try.
Okay, they look like they're trying to get to, doesn't it? It looks like it could be a one, but he's not Rudiger, is he?
And they were looking at Delete. Now that's the big one, but they're competing with Bayern, I think, for that transfer. And that's where they are. And it's turning out to be quite an expensive proposition. Last I read, we're looking at figures like 80, 90 million euros for a defender like that. So it's just a wait and watch in terms of what Chelsea are going to be doing. And even then, you think players take a little time to establish some sort of communication going between them? You know,
I mean, and Rudiger's a big presence, right? Rudiger was a big presence in that back line. They're definitely not replacing that, are they? Even if they brought in a Delict, I mean, he's not going to be at that kind of level, I wouldn't have thought.
No. And look, we're not analysing what they're going to be at game week 1. What I'm trying to look for at the moment is, how did this team play, and what can we learn? Where can we glean information that says, is this going to go wrong, or is this still the well-oiled machine? If it is, then we know the great positions. That the right wing back is still a great position. That the inside forwards, so if you look at them, they're inside forwards, not wingers alongside of it. So if you think about Sterling, that left wing position is where I would see him, because it's an inside forward. That's the Pulisic type role. That could be a very good role. Those centre midfielders, I think this is snuck up as a really painful position actually for them, because they've got so many good ones. I didn't realise how bad the minutes were for people last season. So Conor Gallagher did 2,800 minutes at Palace last season. Then if you look at them, Jorginho's 2,200. Rumours he might be going to Juve as part of maybe De Ligt coming in the other way. But then Conte did 1,700 minutes. Kovacic was only 1,500 minutes last season. 1,500 minutes for Kovacic.
And he was great. They were a separate, different level when Kovacic was playing for them.
Is he done? Like, does he get past that? Like, that's so little minutes, 1,500 minutes for a centre midfielder. And then you've got
Loftus-Cheek.
Loftus-Cheek did 1,300 minutes. Loftus-Cheek's almost doing as many minutes as Kovacic. Like, that feels wrong. Yeah. I don't know. And then Gallagher has done all those minutes. But what you're seeing there is a possession-based model of a footballer. If you go on FBref and put in Conor Gallagher, compared to midfielders, all midfielders in the world, he's in the bottom 3% of passing. Doesn't pass. When you think about Conor Gallagher, he's a nuisance. He's up getting in people's faces. He's pressuring. He's tackling. He doesn't touch the ball. He has less than 2 progressive passes per game.
Yeah. The thing with Chelsea is we just don't know what they're going to be next season. And we need to see a little bit of preseason to establish anything close to it. Because so the thing with Tuchel, right, when he came into the ecosystem at Chelsea, before that, he wasn't known to drill elite defenses and play in a sort of conservative way.
No.
He was a lot more Klopp in terms of pressure from the front, aggressive football. It's all right if you concede a goal, high line, not the kind of choking football that we see. And it's sort of, he just applied a horses for courses approach that stuck, and he stuck with it this season. And I think he's looking to maybe refresh what his Chelsea are this season. It's all assumption and speculation at the end of the day, and we'll only know when we see what happens in preseason. But that's where we are. They're sort of we don't know next season. And even if they're this team, right? I'll pose this question to you. I mean, how many convincing clean sheets do you see next season when we're looking at Everton away, Spurs at home, Leeds away, Leicester at home, Southampton away? I mean, these fixtures don't scream clean sheets to me. They're, in my opinion, they're incredibly good fixtures for an attacker if you could find one.
Yeah.
They're like, I would want an attacker in those fixtures. Mason Mount, I'm looking at you looking at those fixtures, but I'm not really sure about the wing backs unless they're wing backs in a 3-5-2 system. If they're wing backs in a 3-5-2 system, all right, I'll jump immediately. Ben Chilwell, I'll get him. But yeah, we just don't know at the moment.
Chilwell's the one we want to watch. Because
Yeah,
if they play
for sure.
that formation, you can just see it. It's just a goal match, and look at it. Like, they don't bother with a left back position. That's the only issue, is that's why Alonso always used to get booked, because when they got through there, it was like, oh, I'm gonna have to pull you down. And that's the massive gap, though, as well, that Rudiger leaves, is that Rudiger was doing a left back position as well as a left centre back. How many times did you see Rudiger just take the yellow card because he just went through someone, put it out, either put it out of play, or he took the foul, and then just went shouting at the ref, hoping he wouldn't get booked? Like, it's a massive character that they've lost in that sentence. So these are the ones to look at. These are the ones.
You saw that with Robbo immediately, right? In the season, Van Dijk got injured, because Van Dijk is the guy covering Robertson. And he had a little bit of a down year because he didn't have Van Dijk protecting him when he was injured that season. And that's the sort of similar trend that we might see here. So, yeah.
Definitely want to keep an eye on. Do you want to move on to Liverpool then?
Yeah, let's talk about Liverpool. Let's at least do Liverpool and City and talk through what we think we might see in those teams.
Cool.
What do you want to talk about?
I mean,
first? Liverpool?
Liverpool.
Sure.
They're Liverpool up there. I mean, from a control area, I mean, it's the same deal. Trent's off. He's up there. So therefore, they do not dominate any of that right back situation. This is the big change for them, though. They've played without 10. They are, a 4-3-3 team. You can see, if you look at their pass map, Salah is just high. I mean, they're fullbacks, they're not wing backs. And those fullbacks are up where the wing backs are. It's a crazy, crazy system. So we've now got a position where Mane's position's gone. And we've now got more central-ish players, I would say. They've got 3 forwards in FPL, effectively, in Darwin, in Jota and Bobby. Like, they've never, I suppose they had them with Minamino and Origi, but they've actually got forwards that are going to play in the game. Do you think you'll see a change, or do you think they'll try and use Darwin more towards the left?
That's the thing with Darwin, right? Even when he plays centrally, he tends to make runs in that left-hand side channel, which only tells me one thing: more space for Salah to occupy centrally. That's about it. I'm convinced Salah isn't going to have a down year as an asset. And, Mane was the other guy. Now Salah's standalone, the only big guy. Like, this is me. This is my club now, Mane was the only guy threatening him a little. But no, man, Salah, don't even think about going against him or betting against him all season, is what I'll say, because it's too high a risk. Everybody's going to be captaining him. Fulham are the kind of team that can concede 3-4 goals early season, because they remind me a little, not as gung-ho as Bielsa's Leeds, but they like to play attacking front foot football. They will not sit back and absorb. Even if they're absorbing pressure, they'll look to take every opportunity that they can get on the counter, and you could find yourself outside the 2 million game area game week 1. You don't want to be playing FPL in that way. So that's where I am with Liverpool. Earlier, I mean, it's obvious that Trent and Salah are obvious picks, and everybody's debate was whether you go for Diaz or Robertson. And Robertson was really, really good to me last season. And, Pras pointed out some great stats where ever since Diaz came into the team, Robert's done even better. Because if you watch Diaz play, he has a lot of tendency to cut back into the center and shoot, which leaves space for Robbo on that left-hand side, right? And that's good for Robbo. But again, just looking at the fixtures for Liverpool, Fulham like to play attacking football, then they have Palace, and then they have United. Like, I'd want an attacker instead of a defender for those first three. And again, it's because I'm tuned to think only for the first 5 weeks in FPL, because you have a unlimited transfers game week 16. That said, you can't go wrong with either, and we need to stop thinking about Robertson as less of an attacker compared to Diaz, because he's great as an asset. But I think you can't go wrong either way, and I think you need to have 3 Liverpool because they offer the best value.
Yeah, possibly. It's hard to disagree. The fixtures are magnificent. They're a magnificent team with magnificent players. Like, I don't understand. No, Mo, don't get it, because just look at it and just look at how he starts seasons. You'll get the signs, but you know what you're getting with him. If you could only have one of, like, I just now see Trent as the only option. Like, if only people have got one. Is there anyone where you'd say that you would go Robbo over Trent?
No. Despite what happened in the second half of the season. And even then, Trent's underlyings were really, really good. Yeah.
And then I think that third one,
in fact, if you really think about it, I think Trent's a better crosser than Robertson, especially because Robbo likes to play balls that are on the floor. Trent tends to play them in the air. I think that's just better for Darwin because he's got a tall target point now. So I think he becomes an even better asset. So,
and I think Jota gets more minutes, if anything, potentially than last season, and or if not the same, but he's always going to have one of Jota or Darwin to aim at. So he's got 2 very good headers of a ball. And Mane was a good header of the ball, don't get me wrong, but those, a 6'2" guy, he hasn't had that to aim at. I can't see a world that you go without Trent. And
I mean, that strengthens Diaz's minutes potential, though, if you think of all the forwards that they've got as well, which is another thing that we may have to think about a little bit later on once the Champions League kicks in. Because unless he looks to play Jota off that left-hand side with Nunez and swap them round, and even throw in Firmino here and there, just to give all of them a rest. I think it's going to be interesting to see how many points Diaz or even Nunez takes off of Salah, and a lot of that was, I get part of that is centered around the bonus equation as well, which we've already spoken about earlier, a few weeks ago. I just think there's other things to consider. I'm basically in the Mo group though. I'll probably have Salah game week 1.
Yes, it's so hard, and against promoted and a team like you say, they're swashbucklers. They will go at it. That's exactly what you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly what you want. Hard to stay away. And you've got to try and work away again the third.
We go City?
Let's go City.
Hold on, let me get the right screen. There we go. City. Shock horror, they dominate.
It's just a phenomenal.
Literally, unless the keeper's got the ball in his hands.
There's only 2 teams where the number 9 also have a good pass map, and it's City and it's Kane. That is interesting, just in terms of what does that mean. But I've seen some videos around Haaland and his link-up play. Seems decent. It doesn't seem like it's just and actually in a way, what you see with him is his link-up's good, but sometimes in a selfish way that he plays it out, and then his runs are superb into the box. It's so good. So good. And interesting when we sort of looked at those pass maps is that Cancelo had over 100 key passes last season. That's more than I think than any of the teams you watch and their top key pass contributors. I mean, you can't go without Cancelo, can you? Can we just say that's done? Could you?
I mean, if they manage to sign Cucurella and he's at 5 million and there's a 2 million difference between the two and both look like the starting wing backs and you're pinching for pennies, and given the fact that you have Haaland who's definitely going to be in your team, that's the only scenario in which I think you can maybe get away, especially if you want to get 3 premium in your draft. That's the sort of scenario where I imagine you probably go without Cancelo.
I just think he goes to the right. I mean, as an example of key passes last season, Cancelo 109. I'll give you a few selected others. Maddison had the most at Leicester with 42. Mason Mount was 64, most at Chelsea. Son with 46, just corners basically. Now, when you add in that Cancelo doesn't take corners, all of those other guys are talking about there. Trent with 97, they all take corners. To hit 109 without corners is just absurd. Bruno Fernandes 87.
I mean, you mentioned Haaland's ability to make a run. Yeah, I think that they will become more direct this season. They can afford to, and Haaland's going to be wanting to get on the end of these quick attacks. And that's not to say they won't dominate possession as well, because they're going to have those players in behind him to support. But I think they'll transition the ball forward a lot faster, which I think is going to be even more frightening, actually. Because what's going to happen is if it doesn't turn into a chance, then suddenly you're going to have this. What you can see here is this just level of support of 6-7 players where they can just recycle, and then they can go again. And yeah,
I think it enhances the prospects for 2 people more than people realize, and that's one of them is Kevin De Bruyne, because you have one of the best target men on the planet playing for you, and all he needs is somebody making runs, and he puts it on the plate for people. And I think people are. I'm glad you mentioned you're looking at Son, because if KDB is the guy, you're open to that in your head, because I also think Pep's aware of the fact that KDB is getting older. I don't think he plays as much as an advanced 8 who covers a lot of the ground. If you saw the end of last season, he got a lot more free role and he was playing much more towards the goal rather than occupying the spaces on the right where he tend to interplay, etc. as well. So, and there's a big hint in there in terms of them buying Calvin Phillips. Do they move to a 4-2-3-1? We don't know what Pep's version 3.0 is going to be, but there's a world in which KDB becomes a better asset than even before. And the other name is Jack Grealish, because I think Grealish is a better assister than he is a goal scorer. And I think 7 million is a really, really good price for somebody like Grealish, who just likes to run, take the pace of 2 players, and that leaves 2 players open, and that because of that he's able to find somebody. You could see a lot of assists from Jack Grealish this season, and I think 7 million could present a lot of value. I think that left midfield slot is his. I expect Foden to play either in central midfield or the right wing slot. I don't think Mahrez is going to be the starting winger, contrary to popular opinion, because Luke's right. Like, you need somebody to press, and if you have both Haaland and Mahrez, both of them don't really press, and Foden sort of balances that up front. So that's where I am with City at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's only good for Grealish and Foden, in that sense. And again, he's so big, Haaland, that he will occupy that space. And if he plays that role, centre backs are going to be on him. It's going to open so much more space for that inside run. Foden's especially good at that. That's going to be definitely one to watch. Whereas Mahrez, I don't know. I think he wants to be on the ball a bit more than that, and I think they'll use a more direct way. But we'll get the signs. That's again, it's just that let's accumulate the information, see where it is.
The challenge is going to be the minutes, isn't it? It's going to be the minutes, especially at City. I mean, once we start going through those midweek, early Premier League fixtures, and we're essentially 2 games a week for, the entire season, aren't we, really? So it's going to be hard to work out. Community
Yeah.
Shield, will be a help. Jimmy's just mentioned in the chat, but I think that's going to be more to see how they will set up structurally, and that's good that we get that for both City and Liverpool.
Definitely.
The thought that comes to my head immediately is, okay, you want to play aggressive and take a look at a 5 fixture slate, and predetermine in your head that you're playing the wildcard game week 5. The biggest con with that in my head is maybe you want to take 2 or 3 game weeks to see what these teams are doing when the Champions League comes into play. And is there a dominant team in the Champions League? And is there a dominant team in the Premier League? And do players emerge which are stronger in the Premier League? Maybe you want to see 2 rounds of UCL midweek action in play before you wildcard into the big teams with those players. I think that's the only thing I can think of which might make me want to hold on to the wildcard until the first international break, which is around the game week 8 thing. So that's going to be a decision for people, I reckon.
What do you think about this 4 sprints talk?
Sorry?
Well, like this, we're now like in a position where it's like 4 sprints. That's how we're going to play this one.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's 4 sprints as such, because that second, once we come back, out of that one is, I think that's going to be pretty template in how it is. And it's actually quite a long one. And then it's a real short one in those ones. But this one, there doesn't seem to be really any sort of fixture swings that make me go, yeah. Like it was really obvious when it last season. And I do think it's going to be like, you'll feel it more than that. There was a lot of people that seem to think you're a bit of a maverick in the FPL world in which you play it. And I would say is that I had the pleasure of seeing very firsthand last season how you are. You probably source more information and garner more opinion than everybody else I've ever met. There's not a club in the world that you don't go, I know someone from that. That's my go-to source. I'll go speak to those. I'll do those ones. And get into that position. Like, how much do you think? I think first of all, getting into sort of game week 1, and then how much then around that? When do you play your wild card? How much fan opinion from, well, not fan opinion, but friend opinion from different clubs who do you think you'll take into and use those to make your decisions?
What I need is confirmation bias. What's actually happened is I've made the decision in my head, and I only really need confirmation bias. And the guys that I go to, people like you, I remember that call that I made to you one night when I was thinking about Doherty in my wildcard team, and you were negative at first, and then I kind of talked you into telling me, you telling me, go for it. You know what, one you
4.5.
Yeah, exactly, just go for it, etc. So in my head, I really know what I want to do. I'm just looking for confirmation bias, but the extra filter is just wanting to know what I'm doing isn't stupid. That's about it. Because it's easy to consider making that decision and not recognizing that it's probably tilt, or there's a heavy amount of bias involved here. And if you have trustworthy people to go to source that opinion, as long as it's a reasonable decision, it's not on tilt, I'm okay to back the instinct. That's about it.
And when you get to wildcard, one of the things I noted, there was like a previous week where you thought last season that you might wildcard, and it was like, I haven't got time to wildcard. So I wildcard in literally one day. So I went, so if you think about those times last season, I wildcard in 26, and you were like, I kind of like that, but I haven't got enough time, so I'm not going to do it. You did it in 28. So after the free, and it was basically like, I can see it, but I just want to get myself that information to do it. This season, I guess we've got 4 weeks where it's a game a week. Do you think it'll be a similar thing where if you do want to do it, you'll do it early in the week?
Yeah, I'll want to do it early in the week. And I think it's important to prep yourself in terms of potential opportunities where you see yourself doing it, just because you want to arm yourself with as much information as possible. And that's where I am at the moment, because I think there's a clear trend around the game week 5 mark, where nothing's going to change in terms of the big teams. The big teams are going to have good fixtures throughout the season, but what happens around the game week 5 mark is we have enough information about the promoted teams, and we'll be able to find the right enabler or two from those promoted teams. And the second big factor is teams like Leicester and Newcastle, who have no Champions League football, have good fixtures from game week 5 or 6 onwards. And they're the real opportunity, because they're the teams who will be punching above their weight and have no midweek distraction, and will have 90-minute men playing for you throughout. And both these teams have a decent run game week 5 or 6 onwards. And I think there might be an advantage in jumping on these teams early. But again, how much do you want to, because you can get so many players from the top 4/5 into your team. It's a fine balance, because you want to see trends emerging in terms of what happens when UCL football is in place. I still think we're making a slightly bigger deal than it is, because it's still the start of the season. I mean, people aren't really going to be worried about fatigue and rest early on in the season. I think more of this will come into play in the second half of the season. What we'll probably see is maybe more managed minutes in terms of substitutions, but not much else in terms of rotation. So yeah, shouldn't worry too much about it.
Yeah, no, that's fair as well. And no teams are going to want to lose ground straight off the bat either. And with the other teams that are making moves, whether it be Chelsea looking upwards, Tottenham looking upwards, there's 25 points to gain on City and Liverpool, so they can't really afford to weaken themselves in any way, especially at the start.
Nobody can drop points. If you want to take on any of those teams that want to try and take on City and Liverpool, mate, they can't afford it. Every week counts, and I think even just challenging the top 4. Chelsea, for example, Chelsea were in it to win the league up until December, where it was, and in the end, it started getting tricky. They started looking. They started being worried a little bit. So I think that top 4 suddenly becomes even more difficult. Hopefully for Pranil, we've got a new challenger into that race, and then it becomes even more tricky.
And I think people don't realize how good Leicester are historically. They've been 4th or 5th for pretty much every season for the last 4 or 5 years, except for last season, and now they don't have Champions League football. I think Rodgers is decent when he just has the league to deal with, and Newcastle are an unknown quantity at the moment. So these two teams will also be pushing more than you'd expect them to. So
my worst ever season is thanks to Brendan Rodgers, FPL. It's the only thing I remember from it, because I had a bit of a tribal prejudice back in the time to not have any Liverpool players back in those days. And I spent all season bemoaning how lucky it was that Liverpool only played. I think they played something like 42 games in the season, because they went out of the Carling Cup, I think it was called at the time, really early, went out of the FA Cup really early, and had no Europe. And that was the Sturridge and Suarez and Sterling season. That's Rodgers had that season. And when all he had to do was work on that week, they were fitness monsters. They closed down teams like nobody else was closing them down at the time. They were more direct than everybody else. They were animals in how they played. And that is how they play, is if you look at their control zone thing that we showed earlier for Leicester, Adam might actually have it.
Just thinking, I actually do have.
They control. Look at them. This is them in attack. They look like they're a bad attack. They control none of that half, and that's how they lull you in. Their pass map is all in their own zone, and you're like, how has that happened? So if you watch this, you'd think they're quite a dull team. They couldn't be further from it, but they're a pure, fast counter team. And they are going to be looking to spring. And that's how he played with Liverpool. He still plays that way. I saw Barnes's goal in the first friendly, counter, through the middle. Suddenly he's one-on-one goal. Like, they're a definite one to watch. And their fixtures get really good. I think I was listening to Planet FPL. I think they were saying about game week 9 is the kind of 9 to 13 is a real swing for Leicester. That's the only thing about us slightly later.
Cool. Just after the ones that we've got on screen.
Yeah. Just after those ones. what it is.
I have the ticker in front of me. Even the start isn't too bad. The thing is, they've got Chelsea and United in 4 and 5. Otherwise, they have Brentford, Arsenal, Southampton first 3. If you want to make a solid, safe, nailed on bet, Jamie Vardy 9.5 million, I guarantee you he's going to give you 2 goals in those 3 games.
You should guarantee it because they don't have to do any other work. If you can see on the pass map, there's a tiny red dot. That's Jamie Vardy. He literally has no involvement other than to just run into that box and be there. Barnes is a weapon. You know, they are a potential bit of fun. But I don't mind them in those counter games. Chelsea's a counter game. Arsenal away is a counter game. You know, they could do damage.
The other thing with them is Madison's about to hit peak. He's 24. You know, he's getting into prime age. And if you're thinking about last season, you're talking about Justin, Ricardo Pereira, you're talking about Castagna, Evans, and Fofana. I don't remember a time when 2 of these 5 defenders were fit together. Currently, all 5 are fit. And that's a big deal in that team. Because their wingbacks are attacking and they like to have 3 at the back. They have good defenders. I think Evans and Fofana are very, very good at the back. And they didn't have any of these players playing for them back in the day. So, you know, that's also a big factor when it comes to Leicester.
I remember, Ricky P, he was a 6 million defender, wasn't he?
Yeah.
4.5.
That's 6. Sorry?
4.5 million he is now.
Yeah, 4.5 this year. But yeah, he was a 6 million defender before. 4.5 million.
They can't keep playing Albrighton. That can't happen again. We can't have more Perez. We can't have Albrighton. Like, those things need to stop.
But you're saying that there's no need for that now with no midweek. There's no need for it.
Exactly.
Nacho and Daka have not put their hand up to take that role. They had the opportunities last season to take that starting role.
Nacho's put his hand up multiple times. I just don't know what Rodgers' issue is with Nacho.
Why doesn't he?
He's so good. Like, I think he's great. Like, do you remember the end of last season? He was hot. He was probably in everybody's team game week 1 last season, based on the form of the year before that. Yeah. So, yeah.
He never moans he wants to leave or anything though about it, does he? Just hear nothing. Just carries on.
Yeah.
How are we doing?
We're good. I think if there's any other questions in the chat, we can take some from the chat. But we're up over an hour now, and yeah, we should be looking to wrap up fairly soon. So, just a big shout out to those guys in the chat. You have been chatting away, which is good. So, Khan Sharma, we can see you in the chat. Escapades. Mac talking about Gallagher. His Palace role was very different. That's true. What else is in here?
Buna's in there.
Buna's in there. Are we having another watch along this season, guys?
Absolutely.
Yes.
That is nailed on. Just as long as you turn up this time, Buna, that'd be good. Otherwise, we have to get subs in like Gianni. There's a question on any info on Bumo and a 4.5 to Silver at Brentford.
The Silver's one to watch, isn't it?
Yeah. I think he's interesting.
But I don't think there's a lot. I don't think there's a lot there. They're making some signings. You know, they're out there buying players. So I think, you know, people thought, oh, Canos goes to a 5.0 defender. Then they bought a right wing back. So it's like, well, that's that done.
Who do you guys like amongst the strikers outside of Kane and Haaland in the sub 8 million bracket? Who are you liking at the moment?
I mean, I like Wilson. I do like Wilson. And I know that everyone's going to go, oh, he's got City and Liverpool in the first 5. But you're like, hey, he's got Forest straight up. I love it.
Yeah. But that's fine, because you can have him and you can move off him to Tony or something like that a little bit later on. You know, we may see something from Bamford in the first couple of weeks. You know, it'd be good to see him back and see how Leeds set up. I mean, like, Leeds are making moves. Yeah, we will look and say Phillips has gone and Rafinha's going, but they're not resting. They're not just sitting there going, "Oh, we're not feeling sorry for themselves." You know,
not many people are talking about Leeds at the moment, but
no.
Wolves, Southampton, Chelsea, Brighton, Everton, Brentford, Forest.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
it's fun.
That's a good start to the season. If you really ask me,
everyone's screaming over that. What's his name? Christensen or whatever his name is, Rasmus, whatever. I don't know.
Oh yeah. The big right back.
The big right back that had like 15 million shots more than anybody else in the Champions League last season or something like that.
What about Villa? Start's good. Bournemouth away, Everton home, Palace away. Watkins, Coutinho, your boy Coutinho, captain.
Yep. Want to see what they, because I'm actually interested in the Villa defense because I think they've recruited well there with the centre back and the defensive midfield that they've gotten, and I quite like Luka Dean. As much of a troll he is, I think he's a really, really, really good wing back in terms of the quality of crosses that he gets in. So that's a position I actually really like. Dean and Trippier at 5 million a lot. I think they offer incredible value. But the striker that I've got my eye on, I like a couple of people. I like Mitrovic. Just because of what I've read up when it comes to Fulham in terms of them going for goals no matter what, right? And I quite like that. I rate Marco Silva as a coach as well. I mean, finishing 8th with Everton isn't a mean feat, even though things went absolutely downhill. If I were you, I'd keep your eyes peeled for the pod that we have with FPL Lions Luke tomorrow. He was with us for the promotion pod last season as well. And every single call that he made in terms of, he's like, you know what, I'm expecting Brentford. I'm not really to stay up, maybe even push for a top 10. I'm not really sure about the other two teams. And I'm just going to pay attention to what he says before forming opinions on these promoted teams. And because he's incredibly good with the gaffer game as well. So that's one player. And the second player that I've got my eye on is Jofra, the wonder kid from Leeds. If he makes his position, what do they call him? What do they call him?
Joffrey. Joffrey's the cricketer. That's Archer.
Yeah.
It's Joffrey.
Joffrey at 5.5 could be an enabler if he is starting, because he's got the talent. Every Leeds fan I've spoken to really rates him. And I think the manager likes him too. And I like those fixtures. So if you're looking at a cheap enabler, he's in my thoughts. I think Leeds are a team not many people are looking at from an attacking point of view.
They're still cheap, aren't they?
Jesus has come up. Jesus has come up as in the chat. I mean, yes, there are. I mean, all the engaged managers have signed up, as far as I'm aware, or I reckon probably close to. Obviously, a lot of not so engaged managers have now started signing up. He's over 53% owned at the moment, which for me is just bonkers. Based on 2 goals against. I mean, he was 40% owned before that. And then 2 goals against Bundesliga 2 side in a friendly, and he's now 53%. Can we go without Jesus game week 1?
Yeah.
Good.
Could you, if you were spending 8 million, could you go on Kai?
No. If he really looks like it, because we saw those Chelsea fixtures from an attacking point of view, like those fixtures. But it's just that I'm stuck on the premium idea, isn't it? And I know that I won't be able to afford that 4th attacker who's going to be 8.5 million. It's probably going to be in the 6.5 million range, and I'm just hoping Rashford makes life simple for me. That's about it.
Fair enough. So there's a few others in here. There's a question about Robbo or Diaz. I think you should fire back near to the start of the stream. We answer that one. 4.5 million mids or 6 million striker advice. I mean, 4.5 million mids. Who's in there?
It'll emerge.
Colback and
it'll emerge. It'll come out over the next. If you think about most of these,
Andreas Pereira. He's going to be our 4.5 million bid. I've seen him at United, and he knows where the back of the net is. And if Silva gets a tune out of him, and he's playing in the Carvalho position, he's going to be offering a ton of value.
Yeah.
And you'd think they'd be starting because they spent 10 million odd on him. So yeah, that's the one you go for.
Jim was asking about 4.5 keeper. Let's leave keepers. We'll do keepers next week.
All right.
We've done a little bit of work on keepers. We'll do that next week, but let's call it.
But out of the box, shout Jordan Pickford.
Jordan Pickford.
Okay.
I saw our boys Alon from FML FPL said doing TikToks now, if you're that way inclined, and suggested him as the best 4.5 keeper. Yeah.
I don't mind it.
Interesting shout.
Yeah.
Cool.
Likes to rack up the saves. Basically, that's the premise.
He's got Tarko in front of him.
Yeah.
It's a bit better. Probably won't go there, mate.
We'll see. There's plenty of time still to come. So before we have to lock those teams in, I think we're going to call it a day there. We all in agreement?
Sounds good. Yes.
Let's do
Yeah.
it,
So
boys.
cheers to everyone that's joined us in the stream. Remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe so you know when we'll be going live next, because we are now live streaming everything where we can. Where am I going next? Follow us all on Twitter. We're on Instagram as well, by the way. And Baker probably doesn't know this, but I signed up to TikTok last night as well. So we're on
Did
TikTok as well.
you?
So yeah. Go
Yes.
follow us on all the socials, because we're gonna be smashing all the socials this year, as much as possible. And thanks to Pranil coming and joining us this afternoon / evening for him. Good chat, and very off the cuff. Wasn't particularly structured, although we did have a couple of slides lying around. We always do, just back pocket.
So tomorrow, you got a time yet for Luke?
Yeah, 3:30 your time.
3:30 p.m. UK time tomorrow.
FPL Wire.
FPL
They'll be
Wire.
live. And everyone else have a good evening. Speak to you later.
See you later.
Take care, boys.
Cheers.